talk a little bit about where we're at on the broadband and digital equity updates as the state of North Carolina. Cherie, from our privacy officer, will start talking a little bit about AI and some of the things that we are looking to do here within the state of North Carolina, and in particular, Department of Information Technology. We're in the process of drafting some framework and policy that's not yet ready for release for prime time, but we'll touch on some of those aspects. If there's any other business that needs to be discussed, and then we'll adjourn, and hopefully we can give back some significant time to our members here today on a sunny, beautiful Friday morning. So with that, let me start by, I know I saw Tori. So Tori, if you would go ahead, and Tori Crass, raise your hand. Tori will talk a little bit later, and you'll get to meet Tori a little bit more. Tori is our new State Chief Risk Officer, new in the sense that he came on board towards the end of May. Previously, Tori serviced the state of North Carolina. He was the CISO for the State Board of Elections. So we're extremely happy to have Tori come over to join the DIT team and head up our cybersecurity efforts from a state perspective. Also, interestingly enough, I got to meet Tori for the first time last year at a military exercise. So Tori serves in the state militia for that state that's south of us that we won't mention, but you have to go through it to get to Georgia. But anyway, he hasn't seen the light yet to come to the Grand Old North, but that's okay. But anyway, I got to meet Tori down there for the first time. We were at Little Rock, Arkansas at Cyber Shield, which is a DoD National Guard exercise. And so over breakfast one morning, I heard about all kinds of really cool things, and you know, again, got to know him. And so we're happy when he expressed interest in applying for the vacancy that we had. So you'll get to talk to Tori a little bit later. Just real quick on some updates here for DIT. We continue to knock it out of the park. I say that with a big smile on my face. Nationally, we're still embargoed, but there's going to be a number of national awards coming to North Carolina, again, in the world of information technology, will be around our digital commons area. Will also be focused around some of the work at NASCIO, or National Association of State CIOs. We have our annual conference upcoming here in October. And so if you've seen the press releases, we've been recognized as a finalist in a number of categories. Again, very proud of the hard work that continues to occur here in the state of North Carolina around IT, and really trying to change not only the culture, but really looking at modernization efforts, really looking to focus on the North Carolinian a lot differently than what we may have in the past, and start focusing our efforts on how does the North Carolinian interact with government and governmental services. Also on that front as well, NC Tech Association, we just learned that DIT is a finalist in one of their categories as well. And we hopefully will have some individual award winners maybe as finalists. They have not yet announced who those finalists are for individual award winners, but for Public CIO of the Year and for Tech Woman of the Year. You may know that last year, Angie Bailey, who's our director of the Division of Broadband, was the award winner as the Tech Woman of the Year for the NC Tech Association. So we're very hopeful that our nominees this year will continue to move forward and be named as finalists, and then we'll see what happens. I think that award ceremony is going to be November 1st. Talking a little bit about budget and legislative updates. You all see the media. You all hear what we hear. We know as much as you know. And so a lot of the legislative things that have been priorities for DIT are either being addressed as part of the budget, or there's still some bills lingering, going back and forth between the House and the Senate that have some impact on DIT. So at this moment, there's really not a lot to report on. We had this as an agenda item because, like probably many of you here on the call, we were hopeful, I guess is the right word, that there would be some action this week on the budget. And so as things have not progressed forward as what was hopefully indicated from last week, there's really not a lot to say. I'll defer to Director Walker. I saw her on there. Kristen, if there are any comments you would like to make on the budget real quick.
Actually, no. I think you said it all.
Okay.
There's
It's better if they hear it from the state
as my
budget
mother
director than
taught
the
me, if you
IT
don't have anything
secretary.
nice to say, don't say anything at all. So I'm going to
Okay.
leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we'll just keep our fingers crossed and we'll continue to follow the media like everyone else has been doing. We'll go ahead then and we'll move to committee updates. So our first committee update will be our Digital Transformation Committee. Joe Abernathy, who's been chair of that committee, has a conflict today. So Glenn Poplawski of DIT is going to fill us in on some relevant updates. So Glenn, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thanks, Jim. Can you go to, there you go.
Yeah.
Wanted to give you an update on digital transformation efforts. A key aspect that we've talked about in the past has been having an identity solution for our constituents. We're pleased to announce that we will be going live this weekend with our new NCID for Citizen on Sunday, September 17th. This is several years in the making. So we thank everybody within DIT and the agencies for enabling this going forward. There's going to be a lot of value add to this new solution, enhanced security, improved self-service. This includes our residents and business IDs. Later phases to add more value to the solution itself will be social login, so federation with your social logins like Facebook, etc. Multi-factor authentication, which will improve our security profile, reducing risk, and identity proofing. We still are also looking in terms of identity proofing, leveraging some of what GDAC has been doing with their NCE link efforts going forward. Some of the other aspects we've been working on, chatbot. We are implementing a chatbot with statewide IT procurement, and based upon that effort, we will look to move to implement that on the nc.gov, which is on our digital commons that Secretary Weaver mentioned in his initial comments. And then accessibility. Recently completed a sourcing effort for a new tool that helps with accessibility and site performance. This will help improve our efforts to meet the needs of all of our constituents. And the benefit of this too is that it's not only available for our digital commons platform, but it's also available for any of the state websites, whether they're on the digital commons platform or not. As it says there, we'll be rolling that out over the next month here, and then also start to have other agencies on board as necessary for non-digital commons platform websites. As far as the constituent engagement platform, we're kind of at a standstill there until we see what the budget entails going forward. We really need the budget, one-time funding and recurring funding to really be able to kick off that effort to implement that new platform going forward. And that's pretty much it where we stand right now. Any questions, comments?
Okay. Not hearing any. Thank you, Glenn, for that update. I'll just, Glenn had mentioned there about the AI, doing a chatbot type thing. We also have a statement of work out on the street right now for the incorporation of AI into our statewide IT procurement processes as well. We won't talk a lot about it because it's an open, active procurement. I believe responses are due from vendors by the end of, I think, September 27th. James may be able to clarify that a little bit later when he talks. But again, we are looking at process improvements, and part of this is you have to do some BPR here to really enable the capabilities of some of the AI tools and technologies that are there. When we talk about AI, though, we want to make sure that we are today in the state of North Carolina leveraging chatbots, RPA, machine learning. That's not what we're focused on. Our concerns are around generative AI, and we'll wait a little bit later until Dr. Gibbons here talks about that and what we're thinking about doing here as a state as we move forward in that arena. So if there's no other questions for Glenn, we'll go ahead and move into our Cybersecurity and Privacy Committee. I don't think Keith's on yet. I may be wrong there.
No, I've texted him to let him
Okay.
know it's
But
time.
we can move forward, Julie. So let's go ahead, Tori. Why don't you go ahead and talk about, you and James talk about the work you're looking at on the procurement side for cybersecurity contracts.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everybody. Nice to be here. Nice to meet everybody virtually, as it may be. So, getting right into it. So we're looking at something fairly important, I think, to streamline some of what we've been trying to do with cybersecurity services and tools. And in particular, today we've got the 208M contract vehicle and the 918A contract vehicle. And that's two that are covering the majority of our cybersecurity services and tools that we have on statewide contract. So the idea is we're going to revamp that, create a new one that's going to be a combined. Because the challenge that we have with the 208M and the 918A is that they're really focused very narrowly in terms of the services and tools that they're covering. So 208M really focuses exclusively on endpoint, and then 918A is really focused more on assessment services. And that's fairly broad, but it doesn't encompass some of the things that we need to be looking at going forward. So the idea is, if we get to a point where we can create a new contract vehicle that encompasses cybersecurity, we can group that into one area. So when someone needs those services or tools, they have essentially a one-stop shop for those things. And the idea being that helps us streamline that process, helps us identify vendors and suppliers that are going to be capable in that space and turn that around much quicker. James, please add where I've missed.
No, that was very well said. We will extend the current contract so that there's no lapse in service. And then we'll have an overlap for a period of time. And then the new contract will will be the only one we have going forward.
Yeah, so I think that's the main updates for that particular initiative. Trying to think if there's other ones. Secretary Weaver, were there other ones?
IIJA. If you want to talk about IIJA here a little bit.
Yeah. So the meetings for the new round of IIJA funding has kicked off. There's discussions at this point around what that process is going to look like. And there's already questions coming in about how people are going to apply to it, how people are going to get selected, and how the awards are going to be handled and things of that sort. I think one of the key things that I'm pushing on that group to try and do this round of funding is identify where there's synergies across what is needed and what's being requested, so we can try and identify spots where maybe a larger procurement activity makes sense to get volume discounts versus having everybody take a little bit here and a little bit there and not getting the most bang for the money that's coming through. So I think that's a really important concept that we're moving towards. The existing round one funds, those the last update was that the award letters are going out. So there's some process activities that are being driven to try and finalize those types of things and get the awardees their grant funds. So I think that's probably the best that we have at this point. That I'm sure there'll be more comprehensive updates the next time we meet, since there's now all of this kickoff process going on.
So just as a refresher for the committee, the state local cyber grant portion of the IIJA funds allocated $1 billion to the states, specifically for state local cyber grants. North Carolina is, over the 4 federal fiscal years, receiving a little north of 26 million, give or take a few pennies in there, spread out over the 4 fiscal years. So year one is just basically wrapping up here on the federal fiscal year. Year one for North Carolina was approximately $5 million in round numbers. Year two will be approximately around $10 million in round numbers. And year one had a 10% cost match. Year two will have a 20% cost match, which has to be factored in as well. Our planning committee made the conscious decision to direct those funds predominantly to local government opportunities. So that was done purposefully. 80% of the funds have to be directed in some shape or fashion, and we can get into legalese type stuff of what that means, but to local county municipal education type opportunities, and not necessarily at the state level. The state gets 20%, has the ability up to 20% of those funds to use. So consciously, the group looked at year one, focusing on local government opportunities. A number of projects were selected. I think all awards were probably less than $100,000, and from what I've seen from the list in most cases. But now that we're coming into year two, it's 2x the amount of funding availability. We're, as you can imagine, anxiously waiting to see what may be in the state budget from a cyber aspect, because that might play on what we can or what we as a state may need to try to leverage some IIJA funds for, if there's any gaps that are missing from what we asked for from a budgetary request. So more to follow on that, but that's just a little of the backdrop there as well. But the group is rocking and rolling, and our committee is basically largely about 80% of the committee representation is from local government aspects, with 20% being represented from the state. So they meet, I think, weekly, Tori.
Yeah, it's weekly.
So yeah. So just a lot occurring there as well. On the site, just to add a couple comments, some commentary on the statewide contract. It takes a lot to bring these contracts together, and that's why you don't see us necessarily focusing on that as an immediate priority. We recognize that the two cyber contracts that were referenced earlier, we need those in play in the anticipation of a budget passing, so then we're able to go ahead and execute against those agreements to get some much needed work done. So what we don't want to do is stop or negate those contracts while working on the bigger contract. So to the point of James had made about extending the current ones while we're working on the bigger one, and we'll let those two existing ones kind of die on the vine, if you will, and then we'll transition over to the single cyber contract for the state from a master contracting perspective. So that's the thought and intent process there as well. And then, as I said earlier, James is working with our team. We have the statement of work out there to start looking at some RPA chatbot opportunities within the statewide IT procurement office. Actually, James is going to be going to NASCIO with our team and actually talking about that on a panel discussion. NASCIO and NASPO is doing a joint study on use cases for leveraging artificial intelligence in procurement opportunities. So James is going to talk a little bit about what we're doing from a statewide IT side of the house. I was kind of shocked to learn that I thought we were on the tail end of this, and actually we are at the leading edge of this. So that's kind of exciting, but it's also kind of scary. Don't necessarily want to be leading edge, kind of, be a little bit behind, but that's okay. We'll lead from the front, and hopefully we will have a good experience here with what we're trying to do. Cherie, why don't we go ahead and plug you in here at the moment, so we just continue with the theme. And Julie, if you let me know when, somebody got a question?
Yeah, Keith is
go ahead,
on.
Julie.
Keith Warner is here. Yeah.
Okay, Keith, why don't you go ahead for any updates you want to talk about? I know you're on a time clock here.
I am, and I appreciate it, Jim. I think the meeting is at a few meetings in between since our last IT strategy board meeting. Been looking forward to meeting Tori. So Tori, nice to meet you, and look forward to working with you in the committee. I think we've been focused on a few specific areas. Specifically, the cyber pathways continues. I briefed the committee last time around that I've been working within the UNC system with our academic affairs folks, and we did get a presidential scholar assigned to helping us with the pathways discussions. So I think that will help advance this, and obviously continuing to work with Patrick on the community colleges side. We appreciate James attending the last couple of meetings talking about procurement as it relates to cybersecurity. I think a lot of thoughts and ideas were generated in committee about future convenience contracts and other maybe master contracts that could be in play. And lastly, Cherie has given us quite a few updates on the privacy side, and I think those have been very informative. So, Cherie, I know you're on the line. If you want to highlight anything, I'd certainly welcome it.
Okay, thank you so much. So one exciting thing is that through procurement, we have just put out an advertisement for a legal advisor. I think it's a legal advisor consultant 1, and it's for privacy. And that person will be doing, helping us to integrate privacy and operational security requirements into our contracts and updating all of that. And then eventually also AI. We are moving along with the growth of the privacy program. And we've got most of the AI, the draft ready to go for that. We have created a privacy threshold analysis. So it is a combination of the work that the information that security needs along with what privacy needs. This is something that we worked on finished back in August of 2022. We did a refresh of it. We've had a couple of different groups go through it and answer the questions, and we've refined it. We're looking for that to come out in the coming weeks. That is going to replace our existing PTA. We also have a PIA, which is the privacy impact assessment. That template, that draft is also ready. So many of you have probably already heard me say this, but the threshold analysis, I always think of it like if I was to walk into a place, as I step across the threshold and I'm looking around to see like, what are the risks? What do I need to be aware of? And then the impact assessment is once I already understand. So if we think about it, when we're going to be doing contracting, we might put out a request and we get a bunch of information and we decide to go with a particular vendor. And then that vendor says, oh, aha, this particular thing changes these risks. Here's what they are. The impact assessment is where we document that. So those things are going along well. We are also, we've been doing training since I think February. And that's going well. We're also looking at putting together or procuring training for AI, which I think is important. Let's see what else is going on. I do the monthly meetings. Those are still going really well. I have really good participation. We have privacy points of contact in all the agencies. I think that might cover everything that's going on with us just now. Oh, well, I will say the one other thing, which is that the secretary has authorized me to go and take a course on implementing technical privacy controls into IT. So even though I work in IT and I feel like I have, a decent handle on it, I think there's always room for improvement. So I'm going to take that course and gain hopefully greater understanding and be able to pinpoint and implement privacy by design and privacy by default. So I'm excited about all of those things. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ray. Julie, that'll conclude my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Keith or Tori or James, Cherie, as it relates to cyber? Okay, not hearing any, and then we'll go ahead and move on. Cherie, let's come back to you then, and let's just bump up the AI update component. That kind of is a logical fit in there.
Okay, sure. So I'm thrilled to say that I know that people have been waiting and wondering what have I been doing with this. I have gotten my portion of this done, and it will be going out to folks at the end of the week. What we have been doing is we've looked, so I'll be honest, I've been driving this, so if there are mistakes here, these are mine. But I have looked at it 2 different ways. So we know that we need the generative AI. We need that information, we need that guidance, and that is changing. What we've seen that others have done is that they put out interim guidance. That makes sense for us as well, right? Things keep changing. We're seeing lawsuits about the use of AI. We're seeing, questions about copyright, security risk. risks, everything. So what we've done is we've created a generative AI draft guidance, and that will be reviewed internally first. And let me just also say that security has things that they want to put in there that is, you know, somewhat outside of my range. I do data protection, so that's still for them to do. But this is what it looks like so far. What we've done is we've broken it down into like, what is our purpose and our scope. So we're looking at providing a framework that gives us, you know, a framework that's looking at interim guidance, plus also an overarching, what is the responsible use? How would we use it responsibly? Then the guidance is designed to be able to give us an understanding of what are the ethical and responsible concerns that we have as state government when we use AI. So we look at it through the authority standpoint of, you know, that it's our job in IT to give this sort of guidance. And then we look at what is AI, we define it. We're looking at the NIST standards for how we're defining these different things. Then we look at ethical and responsible considerations, things like don't put PII in there, don't put confidential information. Depending on the level of risk, we don't want you to let it train on that data, right, or save your prompts. Because there are things that we would have, like things that are not ready for the public and things like that, that we don't want out there. There's also the issue that I hear talked about sometimes, but not enough, which is that if we release some of our information, then sometimes we don't have people coming back directly to the source. So our updates and our tracking and stuff gets thrown off. Then we also talk about training and awareness, also assessment. So one of the things that we're recommending in both our overarching framework and in our generative AI guidance is that we look to the NIST AI risk management framework to assess our risks. We're also looking at things like what can we do individually to ensure that that the use of generative AI is done responsibly and accurately. So we have guidance on that, guidance on how to use it for video and audio content. What do you do when you need to report and escalate? Also that disclaimer that you should understand that if you put stuff into AI, it could be, you know, considered released to the public, and that may be something for us to consider always when we're doing it. We talk about the different risks and limitations that we have. We have created a chart. Other people have like a nice diagram. I am a wordy person. Ours is a chart. There's lots of stuff to say. Then we also have information about, so it's broken down into two different things, which would be your information risk, right? The risk of using certain types of information in AI, and then your action risk. And it's an illustrative chart, right? So there are things that you could be doing that we may not know about, but this is just to give you an idea. And so we go through that. Then we also have an appendix that defines different things. We have a section for further reading. And one thing that I'm super excited about is we have a section. So we talked about when we're going to be working with the working group, which we hope will be in late October. We're going to be getting together with the different groups, having them vet these policies, give us feedback. But also there's a section here so that we can do like use cases. We can talk about, oh, if you're going to use it in an academic setting and you want to use it for this, here's what the risk would be, here's what the guidance is, so that we can make it as useful to folks as possible. It also has in the appendix links to key things that I think everybody who's deeply interested in AI may be wanting to know more about. So things like the Congressional Research Service's overview of artificial intelligence, like where are we, what's going on. It also has links to like the White House's AI blueprint on the use of AI and things like that. Then it has links to the International Association of Privacy Professionals, trustworthy and distrustworthy and responsible AI, all of that. Then switching to the framework is looking at what are principles that we can incorporate to give us sort of a, so when I think about how do I understand something and how would I understand what to do if I didn't have specific guidance. So we can't give you specific guidance for every situation because we don't know what those all will be yet. So we're looking at what are the overarching things that you should have in your mind that you should know about to inform any action that you would take. That's what the framework does. It comes up with the principles of what we should be doing. It looks at how we can use the NIST AI framework, and then it looks at a key thing that we're seeing, that we've seen actually since 2021, at least at the federal level, that makes sense for what we need to do too, which is to have an AI inventory, right? So we have that requirement in the legislation that we have a data inventory. And then we also have an applications inventory. Why would we not be taking an inventory of what we're doing with AI and what we're using, particularly if we need to respond to it quickly, right? If we have an incident, if Tori's group will find out first thing and we need to shut something down, we need to have that inventory. So that looks at doing an AI inventory and how we can also do an AI inventory at each like agency or entity level. So with the help of Sarah Puffer and Caitlin Mullen, I have been very lucky to create a, and I hope it's a good one, we'll see, to create a form so that each agency can download it and document their own uses. And it's got pull down screens and things like that. I think it's really good. It's based off of San Jose's model, but it also provides some guidance. And I think that covers, I know that I speak really fast, I apologize. I think that covers what I'm doing or what I have done so far, and obviously in conjunction with others. But I know everybody has been waiting on this, and I do apologize that it's taken a while.
So let me try to summarize Cherie there's rapid fire. So we're trying to figure out how to enable a path forward. We do not want to be in a position where we're saying no, but with that in mind, we've got to sit there and put the guardrails in place. So everything that Cherie just talked about later today, we're going to begin an internal review. What she has put together thus far is not 100%. It's not all the way there, but there's enough meat on the bone that at least internally we can begin from the different areas, you know, from our chief data officer, from our CISO, from our chief deputy, from our procurement side, all the factions here of DIT can start taking a look at this and start offering comments, suggestions, inputs. The goal and intent here is that hopefully by the end of September timeframe, we would be at a point in time where at least internally we have a pretty solid document or comments to give back to Cherie that we can finalize this document and then get it out to external stakeholdering outside of DIT. So that's the work that she had talked about during the month of October and a little bit later. So this is not being done in a vacuum. I just want to make sure everyone's clear on that. You heard her say multiple times about leveraging NIST standards and NIST frameworks. We are pulling together, everything we're doing is based around NIST as well, even on the cyber side, the privacy side, we're looking at it from an AI perspective. So what the federal government's going to be looking at and how they're going to be audited. Most auditors are going to come in and look at NIST standards as well and audit against that. So we might as well get some synergies there and start doing some things a little bit different. Some of the things we have to account for in this process: contract terms and conditions. As generative AI continues to become more and more embedded in opportunities, we need to put the appropriate terms and conditions in place with our vendor community to make sure that we have a good understanding of how generative AI is being utilized, what decisions, if any, it's rendering, and make sure that's being captured and accounted for. So that's an area that James from Statewide IT, as we look across the country, it's one of the questions. No one has yet solved this in any state. As far as what are the appropriate T's and C's that we need to look at, but that's something that's going to be on the horizon. When we talk about open AI, that is quite scary. I'll be honest. I think that's the one area where we might say no right now anyway. We're very concerned about the data that's out there. We're very concerned about the use of ChatGPT as an example to help do code regeneration and modernization, because our code is intellectual property and it goes out in open AI. It is not public domain. We've lost any legal protection around intellectual property. And those are things that the IT community does not normally think of. I mean, if I'm an app developer, I'm focused, I'm stuck, I'm going to go to ChatGPT. I need help. I'm going to go do what I need to do because I probably have a very demanding agency that has a time schedule for me to get my stuff done by. We get it. We understand it. And we're not here to hang somebody out like that. But there are downstream consequences to some of these things. And we just got to make sure that our employee workforce has awareness to these types of things. And they're filtering that, as Cherie had said, in their decision-making process. So again, as she talked about the matrix or the charts that are being developed, it's kind of like those kinds of examples. You do this, here's the risk, here's the consequence. Kind of thing from a red, yellow, green kind of perspective. She talked about application inventory, and that's one of the things we're looking at now too, is modifying our application inventory to start capturing the use of AI, and what is occurring there. And especially as an example of a cyber incident, threat actors are leveraging generative AI as well. And so they're going to be looking at opportunities that generative AI is being used and as you can imagine, taking advantage of those situations. So we really need to have a good understanding as to what's out there and what potentially our exposure could be, or what our risk is from that perspective. So a lot said there. And again, what we have created so far is not perfect. Earlier this week, we all got on a conference call, and the state of Kansas reviewed their AI policy document. It was very vanilla. And I'm not being critical when I say that, but it was very vanilla. And we're hoping to, as we sat there and chatted among ourselves internally, putting a very vanilla document out there, really, you should think about this, doesn't help if there's nothing behind it to kind of help guide our workforce a little bit differently. And that's where the areas of focus have been, that Cherie's trying to get to a little bit more level of detail. So we have some meat on the bone for people to be able to digest, take a look at, and get relative examples, so there's a better understanding. There is no real training out there yet across for AI, generative AI. I've been asking a lot of the supplier community, how are you educating your workforce on the do's and don'ts, and what is generative AI, what to do, what not to do. That's an area that's emerging right now, and so maybe in a couple months we'll be able to obtain some training for our employee workforce, just so they're aware. And while we can do all the blocking and tackling here at the state level off the state network, at the end of the day, people can go home and do this. And so it's really important that we focus on the workforce as well and get them to a level of understanding as to what they can and should not do, not only for state government purposes, but for their own individual purposes as well. As you know, I was at Richmond County School District and had a young lady tell me that ChatGPT got her through her science class last year. That's why she got a passing grade. I'm not saying that's the right answer. I'm not saying that's the wrong answer, but our students are out there using it, right or wrong as it may be. So we just got to be aware of that and help educate them likewise as to the challenges. Tori Crass, did you want to add anything? Is Tori Crass still out there? Okay, Al, you got your hand up. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah, I was just going to add to everything that you already said. On one side of the coin, there's the blocking and tackling, but there's also on the other side of the coin, there's the guidance perspective. So I'm sure we're not ready yet, but things like Microsoft's Copilot, may be options for generative AI that we may at some point recommend for the business. So, the business will be interested in the policies that we put in place to guide them what they should and should not do, but they'll also then come to ask us, well, then what do you recommend, IT? So that might be something like Microsoft Copilot, which frankly, I don't know enough about today. I think we're all learning, but the marketing is that's different than other generative AI. It doesn't take your intellectual property and store it. It's only using the database of publicly available data. That's the quote unquote marketing speak for Microsoft. Now, is that true? We don't know that yet, but those are the kind of things I think we need to look at, because the business, of course, is going to want to leverage this. The train's left the station, so to speak. And so it'll be better to give them alternatives versus just guidelines that keep them from using it at all. And I know you'd agree with that, but that's something we'll have to deliver also.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. And one of the things I'm very interested in is how do we do Gen AI in a box? Like get Gen AI in our four walls. Because if we can box it in and it's leveraging our knowledge sources, to Cherie's point, one of the things we are seeing and learning more about is it may not necessarily come back to the originating location for a knowledge source, because now it thinks it's smart enough to go make a recommendation or a decision. In the meantime, an agency business may have updated their website with more relevant content. So it's all those dynamics that we need to account for. So if any way that we can get to more of within our four walls and be able to contain it and box it in, I think that's something we're going to be looking towards, but that's not going to happen overnight. The other thing and Cherie kind of brought up a little bit about the lawsuits right now that are out there with OpenAI. As a state, we need to be concerned that we don't get sucked into or join into a lawsuit if some of our data is out there or things of that nature. So that's why I say when I say open AI is kind of scary, and we might have to go like this and say no. For open AI, there are a whole bunch of reasons there, and we're not there yet. We have not issued any kind of a statement like that, but that could be an outcome potentially down the road as we continue to look further and see how these lawsuits are going. I think my peers across the country all have the same concerns, and we're all looking for that easy button to hit to say, you know, this is how you solve it. And so no one has come up with that yet. So, you know, our different communities, our privacy officer community in NASCIO is working very collaboratively together. Our CISO community is talking about this as well. And of course, we are at the state CIO level talking about it as well. So more to follow. And I think there's going to be a number of agenda topics around generative AI as we look at our annual conference next month, likewise. So it's something that's very much out there at the forefront of everybody's thought. And of course, if you think about the Gartner hype cycle, we're still at I forget what the peak of expectation or whatever it's called before we get to the trough of disillusionment. So I think everyone's seeing the value that it brings, but there's also the recognition of the bad things that could occur as well. Tori, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight the concern at the vendor level and the supplier level, and why, like, what Cherie's working on is really important internally, but it's also important when we're talking about the different reviews that we're doing at a security level, because one, we're trying really hard not to add overhead to that process, but at the same time, these things are very, very concerning, and they're absolutely impactful if we make mistakes in this area. So we have to be concerned about that. We have to be looking at suppliers, how they're using AI in their products, because they're already doing it today. And everybody who isn't doing it today is trying to figure out how to get there and how to do it. I was out at the Black Hat security conference and whatnot in August, and just from the several conversations that I had, more than several, a lot, it's a major focus area. So it's really not that we shouldn't be utilizing those solutions, but we need to understand how they're using it and what risk that brings to us on all of those different areas. And I think really important, just to kind of highlight from the opposite side, where Secretary Weaver had just mentioned threat actors using it. That is a big area that has gotten a lot of attention in the media, but it continues to evolve there as well. And there's different platforms that have been stood up in the threat actor communities to do different things. So we can't ignore it. We have to do something about it to address our risks and try and stay up with this technology. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Tori. Any other questions, comments, board members, anything?
This is Keith. Just one other note on top of everything that we talked about. Good. One other thing that the state really needs to be aware of and look at is our partners, right? And so we have a lot of private partners that provide services to the state. And from an industry perspective, those partners are all hyper engaged in developing AI for their solutions that we will then consume. And so as we look at the partnerships through those state IT contracts, it's valuable to really start to investigate whether or not our partners are using AI and what their architecture for AI is. Is it really secure and private, or is it leveraging open AI? And it's probably not, but so it's not only about our consumption of it and our use of it, but it's our partners' use of it that we then consume.
Okay, Tracy?
Yeah, just following up on that point from Keith, just wondering if you guys have done a lot or thought much yet on that, like, idea of the software bill of materials and the notion that requirements of the people with whom you're doing business for software, you've got a much better sense of what they're using, so you can kind of try to get ahead of the potential supply chain or other issues that Keith was alluding to with partners.
Yeah. I think the fair comment is we definitely are thinking about it. We don't necessarily have the path forward or how we're going to go about doing it yet. So, and I think before we get to that, we got to make sure that there's other things that need to be completed before we get there. And I think what Cherie's working on, the framework, it's going to help drive us a little bit in what we need to be asking from our partners, whether it's private sector partners or other public sector partners that might be engaged, nonprofits, whatever, as well. And then the other thing too is that we also recognize that, the university systems, higher ed is going to be doing some really cool things out there as well. So we don't want to stymie that, but we also know higher ed is a plump target of threat actors, because that's where intellectual property sits. So we want to make sure that we're working like with Duke, with the UNC system and other schools and institutions to that, while we don't necessarily have the ability to say you guys should be doing this, we want to make sure that as a state, and we talk holistically as a state, we're working in partnership and collaboration to get to the outcomes we need. So we have a lot to do, I think, is the bottom line here, and we're going to try to move forward as quickly as we can, but as methodically as we can, because this is not something that we can just just whisk by and then we end up finding out that we had a major oversight. Did you have anything else, Tracy?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to chime back in on a little follow up to that last point. Jim, I think is just right. I do think that there may be aspects, at least in our perception of it at Duke, where that you guys have fantastic security requirements that relate to the business side. There might be opportunities for us. Maybe it's with Keith, maybe it's with some of the other research universities with whom you work, for us to think about whether those have a direct linkage into the universities and how we do that. Because sometimes there are these subtle differences, and the alphabet soup of regulatory requirements don't always translate as well as we might like. And so what works perfectly for government with business and your vendors might not be the perfect solution when we're working on research together. So I do that shout out both to Keith Werner, in case I know he's had to drop perhaps, but perhaps together and with the folks at NC State and Carolina, and also then with Tori, we might be able to put our heads together and say little tweaks there, but I'll stop on that.
Tracy, let me ask you a follow-up question. I know the UNC system, I think, issued some guidance out to the student body on the leveraging of Gen AI, and I think specifically ChatGPT. Do you have something along those lines for Duke yet?
No, we haven't done that at Duke, and I think just like this whole bag of activities,
Okay.
The research related to generative AI, related to AI beyond generative AI, because so many people have sort of conflated them.
Yes.
I think it's really important that, and related to the sort of public versus private sandboxes, so to speak, of where you're getting the data and where you're sharing your data. They're both, as Cherie would know, fraught with risk, right? If our data goes outside, that's a huge risk. But if we're just sort of assuming everything we find on the internet through whatever chat engine is good, that's a whole huge different risk instead of life.
What? The internet's not accurate, Tracy?
Yeah, right. And
okay.
Everything's safe to click on. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you. And if you guys do develop something at Duke, and if you could share it, that would be helpful. We did get from UNC what they have so far as issuing guidance to their student body. So that would be helpful. Any other questions, comments, concerns, things that you think we should be thinking about that you did not hear? This is just an introductory part. As we get to actually getting more vetting in this, and we get to a more complete documentation process, we will be definitely sharing more. This is not being done within our four walls at 3700. Trust me. We are looking to get the feedback and input, because this has got to make sense to everybody for it to be effective. And so that's why we're gonna eat our own dog food, so to speak, first, since we had the puppy club earlier in this morning. And then once we get to a better positioning of things being a little bit more solid, we'll make sure that we're getting this out in stakeholder engagements, and allow individuals or entities to go ahead and comment on it as well. If any of you come across any interesting language that's being put in terms and conditions that you're seeing throughout the market, please feel free to share that with us. I'm sure James, Jonathan, others would like to take a look at that so we can see how the applicability of that is to North Carolina procurement laws. And I don't know if there's going to be anything we're going to need to do from a statutory aspect to enable certain things. I think we probably have the flexibility with how statute's currently written, but I'll default to our legal folks to come up with that final determination. But we're interested in collecting any data that's out there. Gerald, go ahead, sir.
Yes, a quick question. Was there any money in your DIT budget request to the General Assembly for training or apprenticeship programs as it relates to broadband or IT?
We are in the process right now. We do have some apprenticeship programs and internship programs that are developed here within DIT. There is no formal ask for funding. Well, we'll see how the budget turns out, but based upon funding levels that we had from the prior budget, we were able to carve that out. In fact, late July, early August, we saw 16 of our interns go back to school. We had 8 HBCU interns as well. I think, Tori, you're bringing on 2 cyber interns here very shortly, hopefully, as well. So we are, and as we're out talking in our high schools, we are also making them aware of the opportunities we have for internship and apprenticeship programs. So we are very much, as a result of the governor signing of the executive order that kind of waives some of the requirements around post-secondary education requirements, we are able now to maybe tap more directly into the high school workforce, bring them into an apprenticeship program, and depending upon what domain of IT they're looking at trying to do, we can begin to move them up that pipeline. And if they elect to go then for higher education plus employment experience gets you there quicker, if that makes sense. So if we're saying something needs to have 2 years of E&E, a year of college and a year working on site, that got you your 2 years in 1 year, and you can go ahead and move forward. So we are looking along those lines. On the broadband front, there's nothing specific to staffing that we asked for. We're able to live and operate very well within the constraints of the funding that came either through the ARPA funding and then also with the BEAD funding as well. So we don't necessarily have a need there. We are bringing on outside entities to help where needed. And again, we're also making sure that we're doing everything we need to from an auditing perspective, because I'm sure our Office of State Auditors will at some point in time want to come in and take a look to see that we're doing the right things and we're achieving the outcomes that we set out to do. So we're trying to make sure that we have everything in place for that as well when that time frame comes.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I have an idea that's a little bit more specific. So probably this isn't the place to discuss it. So I'll try to get up with you directly in the week to come.
Okay. Thanks, Gerald. Appreciate any ideas there. Anything else before we move off of the generative AI topic? Okay, there's a test at the end or you can't get off the team site, so make sure you took good copious notes. We'll go ahead then and move to something I know is near and dear to Gerald's heart, and that's on the broadband front. So just a couple updates here. Again, I think you all continue to see the progress that North Carolina is making, and I'm very proud to say I think we have the best program overall in the nation, hands down. So we'll talk a little bit about the BEAD funding, which is the NTIA program. The hard work that our team has been doing on challenging the FCC mapping. If you recall, about 2 years ago, North Carolina was targeted to receive about $800 million of BEAD funding, especially when Secretary Raimondo came down. I think that was May of last year. and was talking about the program Internet for All, along with Governor Cooper. You all saw that North Carolina received over 1.5 billion. That came from a lot of the hard work and effort. That came from the state as a whole rallying, providing us with the data points that we needed. It came from the hard work of our GIS team and doing the mapping and being able to showcase where we had pockets of unserved, underserved communities. This whole census block thing, as you all know, is I don't want to say as a joke, but that's not the way we need to be looking at our communities through a census block. We need to be looking at it from a household to household to household basis. And so we did not lose a challenge to the FCC, by the way. And so we were able to effectively obtain more money, and we got the 4th largest award of any state here in the country. So very proud of that work. If you saw that we did submit our draft 5-year plan, and what you're hopefully seeing is, especially when it comes to broadband, we are making things publicly available for comment. So everything that we're doing is being put out there for public consumption, public comment. That includes the vendor community, and that includes members of the communities to be able to comment and give us feedback back. We did get that 5-year plan submitted to NTIA back in July. That plan came back approved in August, and now we're by December 27th. We're right now working on our initial proposal, and our 3rd quarter update on BEAD is there's a webinar on September 18th at 2 p.m. If you want to register, it's ncbroadband.gov/BEAD, B-E-A-D. And you can get all the relevant updates and hear what's going on from the broadband team specifically. On the Great Grant front, to date, we have awarded more than $347 million of the $350 million in Great Grants. I think it's important to annotate here that also has resulted in $181 million from the provider side being invested back in North Carolina. So this is not a one-way street of funding. These providers are making an investment back into the state of North Carolina. So right now we're looking at about 140,000 households being in scope, and about 4,500 businesses being in scope across the state. Of the 125 awards that are tentatively out there, 85 had been completed. That dollar amount under contract right now is over $240 million, which means that these service providers are starting to rock and roll and get that connectivity to the household laying fiber. We're working very hard to get through the others as well, and get that all the other 40 that are remaining. Broadband pole replacement, we had public comment period on our proposal for that program that concluded on September 7th. So we're going through right now and looking at those comments that came back for any adjustments that we may want to make within the program. Just for recollection purposes, that's $100 million that the legislature authorized as part of the ARPA funding to reimburse providers as they need to replace poles out there that are providing fiber or other important telecommunication services as part of the broadband initiative. So we're really excited about that. The CAB program, Completing Access to Broadband, we had that out for public comment as well. We made our first CAB awards right now that are totaling $22 million. If you remember, the legislature authorized, I think it was around $400 million in ARPA funds. What we saw is a number of counties had already utilized their ARPA funds for other purposes. And one of the requirements was we could cost share with a county or local government entity provided they were using their ARPA funds. So we are looking to go back and be able to repurpose the unused money from the CAB program back into the Great Grant program and be able to go ahead and award to secondary or tertiary areas where we can go ahead and continue to get unserved areas connected back into the broadband area. So really good work there by our team. If you ever get a chance, go out and look at NC1 map. That's showing you a lot of down to the granular level in a community. That's showing you where we have unserved, underserved, and served areas of the state. The beauty of that is, and this is showing how government can work if we all play in the same sandbox. All that information is based upon data that we're getting from our 911 systems. So wherever a 911 operator will dispatch a first responder to a valid address, we have all that addressing information. So we know every valid address in the state of North Carolina because we have local government through our 911 process is feeding into this mapping exercise, which is now enabling broadband. It's an awesome experience. It's awesome to see that kind of work occurring. And I'm very proud of that work around the NC1 map. And that is one of the finalists out there for NASCIO as well. Our legislative members are using that mapping as well. As they're trying to handle constituent calls. And again, for anybody that's out there, if you do have any constituent issues as it relates to broadband, please let our team know. We do have 2 people who will be responding to constituent concerns. A lot of it is, I'll just pull 2 vendors out. I have Charter Spectrum, but AT&T is bringing fiber, or Google Fiber is a block away. Why can't I get to Google Fiber? We can help explain that, and we can help work through some of the mechanics of that as well. So there's no reason why there's an unaddressed or unmet need out there in North Carolina right now. We should be able to at least address that or give somebody an answer that's accurate and factual, and maybe a time frame as to when something is going to get completed. The other area that we continue to focus on is the Affordable Connectivity Program. We have over 841,000 households today in North Carolina signed up for that program. Just as a reminder, that's the $30 cost offset on your internet bill if you're in a qualifying program. We believe that we should be looking around 1.2 million households. So we still have a lot of work to do there. Obviously, you can't get internet if you don't have internet service in your area. So we know there's that gap that we're going to have to fill. This is not, the $30 is not paid directly to a household. That goes directly to the service provider. So it comes as an offset then to the individual's bill. The $30 is important because the Internet for All program that the Biden administration launched is asking providers to provide high-speed internet for $30. So then effectively then it becomes hopefully zero cost to a family that might be struggling or in need, especially as we look at inflation and everything else that's been going on economically here. So getinternet.org to enroll. And again, we continue to push that out as we are doing our school visits, as we're doing our community visits, working with community leaders, working through the legislature, any way that we can get that information, that messaging out, we are. So that's basically the highlights from a broadband perspective. Before we get to other business, just a couple other things I just want to mention, just for everyone's awareness. October is going to be a busy month. So the long-awaited conversion from our financial backbone system to what we're calling NCFS, North Carolina Financial System, is occurring the weekend of October 9-10. So I know Director Walker and State Controller Nels and agency heads and everybody is looking forward to, with great excitement for that transition. But it's a transition that is very much needed and needs to occur for a lot of reasons. So I just want to make everyone aware of that. Also, eCourts, although I don't know if we have anybody from AOC on the call here, eCourts is implementing the next phase of their rollout in Mecklenburg County over the same weekend as well. And so not that that has a direct impact to one or the other, but just for awareness purposes, our folks at GDAC and CJ Leads are very much on top of that, as well as our team supporting DPS and DAC as well. At the end of the month here in September, both Cherie and I will be attending the NGA Cyber Planning Summit up in DC. I'm going to be talking about the holistic state approach work that we're doing here in North Carolina. Cherie is going to be talking about the relationship between privacy and cyber as well. So we're looking forward to that event. And then Cherie will also be talking to the National Council of State Legislators on that Friday as well at the end of the month, all in the backdrop of government shutdown in DC. So it should be quite interesting to be up there at that particular time. Lastly, just to bring up is we've had the opportunity over the summer to go out and visit a number of our school districts, either through the Governor's School Supply Drive or also working through NCBCE to get a good understanding as to what's going on there from a technology education perspective and what's being offered to students and different things. It has been truly an amazing experience. It is awesome seeing some of our educators out there in our school districts, the work they're doing. The fact that these students are looking at these teachers as mentors, as they're getting introduced to technology. And what we're trying to make sure people understand is you don't necessarily have to be in a computer science program to be a valued member of an IT team. We had a young man in Kannapolis City School Districts that was a musician. Elton John's his favorite artist. He loves doing keyboards, as you can imagine. He never thought of himself as being IT. And I'm there trying. You're the kind of person we want. Musicians are innovative, they're creative, but they're also logical. They'll think outside the box, but they also understand how to follow process, and they help challenge things. And you're the kind of person that we want on our teams to go ahead and continue to drive us and spur us forward. So future attorneys, we had future agriculture members. We did have some students that were interested in cyber, which is good. We want to continue to promote that. And speaking of cyber, Tori will be at the end of the month out at the Carolina Cyber Network at Montreat College as well. That's why I'm going to the NGA Cyber event, because he's got to go out to Montreat. But the Carolina Cyber Network continues to grow. That's great to see. I think we're up now to 18 schools, whether community colleges, universities, or actual colleges are now participating in that and creating that important pipeline of talent for us from a cyber aspect. So that's the basically synopsis of comments for me. Is there any other business anybody wants to talk to? I did promise that we would be able to give you some time back. Go around the horn. So Jeff, you're right in front on my screen. Anything, Jeff?
No, we've covered the topic. You talk about taking copious notes. So this is how my crazy brain works. So lots going on.
Okay, well, again, welcome any feedback. Gerald, I know we'll talk a little bit later. Thank you for asking your questions. Tracy, anything?
No, appreciate all the information and asked my couple questions or made my comments earlier. So all good.
Okay, I'm just looking around. Madam Auditor, I see you. You're on the screen, or anything from you, ma'am? Okay, she may not be there anymore. Director Walker, anything, ma'am?
No, just thanks for all the updates. Sounds like a lot of good work's going on. And I sent an email to Tori, but we do have an analyst working on federal fund stuff. We got a team of one right now, but he's been looped in with Nate Denny a lot, but happy to help you all with the IIJA, other work you've got going on. We also hope to get some more resources in this pending budget. So
We're keeping our fingers crossed. Yes.
That's right.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for all your
Secretary
support.
Weaver?
Yes,
Secretary
ma'am.
Weaver, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Madam Auditor.
I'm just going to say I've had some technical issues this morning. But anyway, I've been able to hear everything and hear all the questions. But no, I don't have anything this morning. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for participating. Mark, anything from Secretary Cashwell or from DOA?
No, sir, but thanks to everybody for all the hard work. It's greatly appreciated.
Okay, I'm looking around here. I'm not, Julie, is there anybody I'm missing here that's on the screen?
Keith Briggs.
Okay, Keith?
Nothing new, although Jeff, if you send me your notes, I can feed it into AI and it will generate a summary.
Yeah, you notice how that whole open AI conversation just went out the window with Keith, but that's okay.
And Rocco.
Yes, I was going to say Rocco for last, but I'm sorry. But go ahead, Rocco.
Jim, I'm good. Appreciate everybody's hard work. I've got a little bit of homework to catch up on some of what was presented today.
Okay. And again, I'll apologize for not having the June meeting. Like I said, we really didn't have any content that was warranted of bringing the group together. So hopefully the next time we get together in December, I believe. And Julie, what's that date?
December 15th.
Okay, so December 15th is our next scheduled opportunity, and let's hope that we're able to talk about a budget. And I'll just smile and say that. With that, then I'll go ahead and move to conclude the meeting. And again, thank you everybody for coming together, and I hope you found it informative and relevant. And Gerald, I look forward to talking to you next week. Okay, have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you.